Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Let me start this story by telling you a bit about myself. My name is Jake, I'm 26, and I work in accounting. I came from a pretty poor family, so growing up, I didn't have a lot of things that most people my age had. But when I was 18 and I was getting ready for university, my parents and I decided that at this point, I needed a laptop. But since they were really expensive, we decided to look for a second-hand one. So every day after my summer job, I would browse Craigslist for something around my price range that was still usable. After a few days of browsing, I found a 2007 Dell that wasn't completely outdated. I contacted the vendor to see if it was still available, and to my luck, it was. We worked out a date for me to check it in person and then potentially buy it. Then when the day came, I got dropped off by my dad at the seller's residence while my old man waited in his pickup. He was trying to help me get out of my shell since I was a shy kid growing up, so he often made me do things on my own so I could get some more self-confidence. I knocked on the door and waited, and after a moment of silence, I could hear a kid yelling from the other side of the door, only for it to be opened by a man in his mid-30s. He smiled and asked how he could help me, and I introduced myself and told him that I was here to check out the laptop that he was selling. He said, "Oh, of course. I just need to grab it. Do you want to come in or do you want to wait on the porch?" I told him that I'd be fine waiting on the porch. He nodded and told me that he would be right back before closing the door. After about a minute, the man opened the door, laptop in hand, and sat down in one of the chairs as he booted up the computer. It turned on perfectly, and then he handed it to me. I opened Internet Explorer to check if everything worked, and seeing the window open and connect, I was very satisfied. This would do the job. I handed him the money before I got up with my new laptop. And as I was walking down the driveway, the man called out to me. I turned around confused, thinking, did I do something wrong? I looked back at him to see him holding a cable. "You're probably gonna need this too," the man said with a smile. And I felt my cheeks turn red from embarrassment. I'd completely forgotten about the charging cable, and I awkwardly walked back up to him as he handed it to me and shook my hand. "I'll let you keep that for free," he said with a chuckle. I then nodded before speed walking to the truck. My father was waiting there, and I got in his pickup and then closed the door. I put on my seatbelt and I held the laptop close to my chest as we drove off. Once we were home, I went to my bedroom with my laptop to mess around with it and get comfortable using it. But after a few minutes, I realized that the man hadn't deleted any of his personal files from the laptop. I was going to delete them then and there, but something caught my eye. It was a folder simply labeled as Future Family, and then it got off. I assumed that the incomplete word was family, but future family? That didn't make any sense. The preview in the folder had trees in it, so it probably wasn't anything about family planning, was it? Feeling guilty about snooping around through such a nice man's private photos, but I was curious as to what it meant. I opened the folder, and what I saw was a picture of a woman sitting in a park. She wasn't really facing the camera. If anything, she didn't acknowledge its existence. A very artsy pose, I guess. I pressed the arrow key to the next photo, in which the same woman, or at least I think it was the same woman, was walking down a street and her back was to the camera. Why would someone take a picture of her walking down the street? I moved to the next photo. This one was a photo of her, still in the same outfit at a door, hunched over it as if she was unlocking her door to get into the house. Given that there was less lighting in this photo, I would assume that it was evening. The photo was taken from far away. About a quarter of the image was covered by a wall, as if the photographer was hiding behind it as they took the photo. This is starting to get creepy. Was the old dude who sold me this stalker or something? Thoughts of what happened to this poor woman filled my mind as I continued to look through the photos. One of her eating at a cafe, another of her working at a store, a few of her in a library. Then, another which scared me more than all the others combined. A picture of this brown-haired woman, asleep in her bed. He got into her home. What was he going to do with her? What did he do to her? And with a lump in my throat, I pressed the right arrow key again to find a picture of her with a man. Was it him? It looked kind of like him. This time, the woman was smiling at the camera alongside the man, only for the next one to be of her sleeping again. As I filtered through the photos, there were photos of them together, at first scarcely, but as I moved further through them, there were more and more photos of them together. Then, at the near end of the photos, at picture 352 of 364, was a picture of the woman showing off a wedding ring to the camera, followed by one of them together, and a few wedding photos, and lastly, a picture of the two of them holding a newborn child. Their newborn child. I felt a pang of guilt once more, but at this point, the man had aged to the point in which I couldn't tell if he was indeed the same person who sold me the laptop. He was his wife's stalker. I felt conflicted as to what I should do. I can't just leave this information to myself, right? But what would I even say? Would I say, hello ma'am, sorry to bother you, but your husband actually stalked you before you two started dating each other? I looked back at the last photo as the small child in the photo, and I remembered hearing a kid's voice from inside their house, probably a toddler, given the date of the photo. And with a deep breath, I did a system wipe of all the data on the laptop before going to dinner, just hoping to forget it. And fortunately, it's been nearly 8 years since then, and I still haven't gotten it out of my mind. Did I do the right thing? Hi, I'm Lisa and I'm 27 and female. I've been on this subreddit for a while now, and I've decided to share my own story. This happened 5 years ago. I had recently moved into my new apartment, which was further from my job, but given my lack of driver's license and how dodgy the public transport is in Detroit, I decided to just get a bike, since it wouldn't be too far. So, I opened my laptop and I started browsing Craigslist for a used bike to see if I could get any good deals. After finding a few I was interested in, I decided to give the owners a call. The first one had recently sold his bike and had yet to take the ad down, but the second bike I was interested in was available. I asked about the condition it was in, and the seller offered to let me see it in person before I made any sort of deal. I agreed and I told him that I'd be there tomorrow at around 4 p.m. to look at the bike and then make my decision. And so the next day at 4, I arrived at his residence. It was a small flat with a silver car parked in the driveway. I walked up to the door and I rang the doorbell. And after a few seconds, a man opened the door. He was a tall, thin man with shoulder-length brown hair. He was wearing a white shirt with a stain on it, as well as a pair of jeans. "Hi," I said. "I'm here to see the bike. Are you Carl by any chance?" And the man smiled and said yes before exiting his household, and then he closed the door behind him. As he led me to his garage, he kept looking back at me. He said, "You know, you're pretty cute, Lisa." I didn't really know how to respond to that, so I tried to change the subject by asking about the bike. He opened the garage to reveal a cluttered space, and from it, he pulled out the bike and rolled it into the yard. "For your viewing pleasure, beautiful." Of course, I was really weirded out, but the bike looked really good for the price he was asking, so I just grit my teeth and bared it as I checked the state of the bicycle. After inspecting the bike, it seemed to be in really good condition, and with my mind made up, I turned to him and asked if he was still okay with the price he posted. But as I turned, I noticed him really close to my face. I flinched and I backed up a bit, but he didn't even react. He stared me dead in the eyes and said, "Well, how about this? You go on a date with me, and I'll give it to you for free." I was starting to get a really bad vibe from him, so I fished out the $50 from my purse and I handed it to him, hoping that he would get the message. But he barely acknowledged it. "Does Saturday sound good to you? I'll pick you up." He clearly wasn't taking the hint, so I took another step back from him and I said in a firm voice, "No, thank you. I'm not interested." And I handed him the money. He stared at me for a moment, and in that silence I felt scared. We were alone in his yard, and he was standing between me and the road, and he was much bigger than me. Thankfully, he let out a sigh and then took the money. With that said and done, I took the bike and walked it out of his property as fast as I could before getting on and cycling away. And as I did, I vaguely heard him saying, "See you later, Lisa," as I sped off, but I didn't really care. All I cared about was putting as much distance as I could between me and him. Once I had made it to my block, I felt a comforting sense of home. Feeling protected, I pulled in, but that was just wishful thinking. As I parked it at the bike rack for my apartment and I walked up to my room, I realized that my phone had been going off the whole time. And given that I was writing and in a less ideal mindset, I probably just didn't notice it until now. When I checked my phone, I saw 9 text messages from Carl Euler. My heart dropped. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest as I checked what he texted me, and I realized now my mistake. But at that time, I wasn't thinking about anything other than what kind of weirdo I just bought a bike from. And as I opened them, a little checkmark appeared below his message. My eyes grew wide as I came to the realization that he now knew that I had looked at them. He sent another text, a simple, "See you Saturday." I immediately scrolled up to see what he wrote. "Hey, it's Carl. So, are we still on for this weekend? I know, you're just trying to start things out on the wrong foot and not take advantage of me." You're so thoughtful. But I don't mind. I know you're a good girl who's gonna treat me right. I'll be sure to treat you for the $50 though. Are you still on your way home? Lisa? And then, the last text after he saw that I checked them, it said, "See you Saturday." I blocked the number and hoped that that would be the end of it. And I spent the next few days trying to forget about it. But his last message, "See you Saturday," was stuck in the back of my mind. That morning, I looked out of my door suspiciously. He doesn't know where I live, but paranoia seemed to be getting the better of me. And seeing nothing, I chastised myself for being so childish, and I went on my way to the store. It was only on my way back that I realized that my fear was right. Right there, on the front of my apartment building was Carl. He was just standing there on his phone. That was until he saw me. A wide smile spread across his face as he looked at me and said, "Lisa, hey, I'm here for our date. Did you get my text?" he said as he walked towards me. I unconsciously backed away, shaking my head no and holding my grocery bags tightly. I could feel myself shaking as he approached me. But just as he approached me, I heard another voice from behind me. "Hey, is there a problem here?" I turned my head slightly to the left to see my neighbor Daniel walking up beside me. He looked at me with concern before looking back to Carl. "No problem, just here for my date," he said, looking expectantly at me. And no longer alone, I slightly felt safer, and I said aloud, "No, I don't want to go on a date with you. Please, leave me alone." I tried standing a bit taller to sound more stern, but Carl wasn't having that. Come on, Lisa, don't be like that," he said, trying to get closer, but as he took a step, Daniel moved in front of me, looking him dead in the face. "You heard her, buddy. She's not interested." Daniel was a pretty big guy with a good build, so he was towering over Carl as they locked eyes. And after a few agonizing seconds, Carl nodded before leaving. Me and Daniel both let out a sigh of relief as he turned the corner on the block before he turned and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, and after that, I never saw Carl again, and I hope that I never will. This all happened back somewhere around 2017. I had just turned 18 that year, and I was trying to save up money to get my own place. And not necessarily because I wanted to, but because I was the youngest of 4 boys, and I think my parents were at a point where they just really wanted me out of the house. Not trying to complain about my parents, but they were a bit pushy about me getting money and getting the hell out. I had a job, it just didn't pay well, and I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do for college, about my career, and all of that. Honestly, it's not important, but it kind of frames what was going on in my life. Because my parents wanted me gone, and they had given me a pretty tight time frame as to when they wanted me out, I was doing almost anything that I could to get money. It was around Christmas time, and thankfully, I did have a few avenues to get money saved up. Like I said, I had my job, and that was covering most of the necessary expenses. And every time anyone asked what I wanted for Christmas, my response was, $50. Mostly joking, of course. That said, I also had a few things that I could sell, but that was supposed to be my last resort. The week before Christmas, I kind of hit that last resort. Like I mentioned, my parents wanted me out pretty quickly, and they were pushing for me to find a place the first week of January. I was getting there, but I needed a little bit more. So, I moved on to selling my electronics, which is something an 18-year-old never wants to do. I sold my old laptop for $100, and I sold my brother's old Nintendo consoles for a bit of money. And I ended up at a point where I was listing my PS4 Pro, which was my prized possession. Thankfully, they were harder to find in my area, so I was able to list it on Craigslist for $500 with the extra controllers and a few games, and I was willing to be talked down to $400 if it really came down to it. I only needed about $200 at this point, but it's obviously better to have more than what you need in these situations. Within a couple hours of me listing it, I got several messages from people that were obviously scammers and spammers. But there were also a few people messaging me asking if they could get it for $100 because they had a sick kid that really needed it for Christmas and it could be their last one. Look, I'm all about helping out sick kids, but using that as a reason to talk a seller down to 20% of their asking price is just really low. I got another message from one guy that asked if I was willing to come down a bit on the price. I assume it was going to be another sob story about a sick kid, and he was going to try to lowball me hard. It seemed like that's how it was going to go when he mentioned it was something that he wanted so he could play some games with his 8-year-old daughter and her mother. But then, he actually came back with a modest request. $50 off. He would be able to give me $450 in cash that day if I was willing to meet up with him in public. I know, it's not smart to just take the first good-sounding offer, but within 4 hours, I had gotten over a dozen sob stories and twice as many bots. I was seriously done with this already. I responded and told him that it was his, and I asked where he wanted to meet up. He responds thanking me and telling me that they would be able to meet me up in a parking lot of a hotel that was around 5 or so miles away from where I lived. I was a bit confused on why he would want to meet in a hotel parking lot, but at the same time, I wasn't about to question the choice. It was still in public, and hotels have cameras. Plus, there would likely be people around. I packed up the system with the extras all nicely in a box. I tossed it in my passenger seat, and I told my mom where I was going, and then I headed out. I got out to the hotel in question, and I parked. Then I messaged the guy saying that I was there and to let me know when he gets there. He responds saying that they're actually staying there for the night and that he would be right down. They asked if I could bring it into the lobby, and at that point meeting here made a lot more sense. And while I was a bit iffy on walking across the parking lot into the lobby with an expensive console, I had parked pretty close to the front, so I risked it. I got into the lobby with a box, and the front desk asked if they could help me, and I told them that I was just meeting someone that was staying there. I sat down, and I waited for a few minutes. Then, I saw a guy exit the elevator that looked like he was looking for someone. I correctly assumed that it was the guy. We did the customary greetings and moved forward to the transaction. He opened the box, looked over the items, and remarked that they all looked new. And I told him that I had bought it a while back and that I was the only one that ever played it, and that I was really paranoid about keeping the stuff clean. I mentioned that I had even opened the case and blew out the dust before I listed it, so it was in near perfect condition. I showed him the disc for the games that I had listed, then also mentioned that I was throwing in my copies of Crash and Kingdom Hearts for his little one because I know she'd probably like them. He thanked me and said that he really appreciated it. Honestly, this transaction was going super smooth for our whole conversation, and I thought it was going to be a quick sale. He pulls out his wallet and pulls the cash out, and I see 400 bills. He then mentions to me that he had the full 150, but they had to spend the 50 on pizza for lunch, and that because of that, he was a bit short. And then he says something that I really did not expect, and this is going to be verbatim because I don't want to paraphrase and have this come across as less creepy than it was. He said, and again, "I'm sorry, I'm $50 short, but my girlfriend and my daughter are up in the room, and I'd be willing to let you spend some time with them if you would give me a discount." I want to further emphasize that this guy mentioned his 8-year-old daughter in this context. It wasn't just, "Hey, wanna spend time with my adult girlfriend?" It was girlfriend and daughter. This guy was willing to sell his girlfriend and their child for $50 for personal time. I really don't know what else to say about this all, honestly. The whole thing left me at a loss for words. Pimping out your girlfriend for $50 off a PS4 was gross, sure. But then, including your young daughter in that context was a new level of disturbing. And after a few seconds of just kind of staring at him, and him staring at me, I guess waiting for an answer, I just said, 400 is fine. And I put my hand out. He handed me the cash and said thank you, and I just said yeah, and I turned to leave and put this event behind me. Honestly, I didn't know what to do after this. I don't know if he was being serious or if he had just said that to get a discount because who in the right mind would accept that? Or maybe if it was a weird sting, and if I had said yes, I would have been jumped or arrested. Out of all the possibilities, the worst one, and the one that seriously haunts me, is the one where this was an honest offer. It scares the hell out of me to think that this guy was being serious. And that's the end of it. I told my parents and they didn't seem to really care. I didn't report it to the cops because I didn't know what to tell them. I got the money together and I moved out, and I have been on my own ever since. I really hope that that guy wasn't serious, but if he was, I am so very sorry that I never did anything more, and that, as an ignorant and confused kid myself, I didn't know what to do in this situation. I'm a male, and when I was 25, I had finally gotten to a place in my life where I could start pursuing my passions while supporting myself after I had moved out. Feeling like now was the right time to pick up a hobby, I checked Craigslist for a guitar. I had always wanted to learn how to play, and now that I had the time and money to invest into it, I wanted to get started right away. Of course, I wasn't gonna buy a brand new one. Money wasn't tight, but a good guitar can cost a lot of money. And since it's my first one, it's better to take used instruments first. So, if anything happens due to my newness, I wouldn't have lost hundreds of dollars. Searching Craigslist, I had found one that seemed to be in good condition that wasn't too far from me, and after contacting the seller, I confirmed that it was still available, and according to him, the guitar was only in good condition. And while I didn't know anything about guitars, I did still want to go in person to check it out. After all, It was only a few blocks away and I wouldn't even have to drive. I arranged a meeting with the vendor, Mitchell, to see it tomorrow, and I went about my day. The next day, as I was driving back from work, I stopped by Mitchell's house and I knocked on his door. I was greeted by a pregnant woman with long brown hair wearing a polka dot dress. Hi, is this Mitchell's house? I asked. I'm actually here to look at the guitar that's for sale, I added. The woman nodded and smiled at me before calling to someone from the inside. A man with short hair and a red shirt, whom I assume was Mitchell, came to the door behind her. She informed him that I was here to see the guitar, and then went back inside with a smile. The man then looked at me as he stepped outside. He gestured with a nod towards the garage, which he opened to reveal a rather crowded space. The wife wants to make some room for when the baby gets here, he said. His voice seemed melancholy, with a hint of a southern accent to it. And the money will probably help too. But despite what he said, he seemed depressed as he looked at the piles of stuff in the garage. Everything from rifles to tools to boxes labeled Pokemon was there. And as he took a few steps in to bring out the guitar case, he brought it back to the front of the garage and set it down before opening it. It revealed an orange woody acoustic guitar. I'm sorry, I'm not really good at describing guitars. She's a beauty, the man said. It's a shame I gotta let her go. He looked at the instrument up and down. A damn shame. I stood there awkwardly while he gazed at it. So, would you take 100 for it? Mitchell looked up at me with conflict in his eyes. 125? I shyly suggested, and with a deep breath, Mitchell shook my hand, still looking at the guitar. With that said and done, I paid him the money and closed the case before walking back to my car. As I was walking back, Mitchell just stood there in the driveway looking at me, even until I got inside my car and drove just a few blocks away. His eyes followed me. The rest of the day was pretty normal. I spent the first few hours goofing around with a guitar, randomly plucking strings, vaguely to the melody of the McDonald's jingle and such, before checking where I can get lessons. After the initial hype of having a guitar die down, I made dinner, watched some TV, and I searched the internet for a few hours before finally falling asleep. Unfortunately, I awoke to a loud crashing sound. I could hear what I can only assume to be shards of glass sliding across the floor as loud thudding footsteps stomped across my home. I immediately got up and I snuck to my door, hoping whoever it was didn't come this way. I locked my bedroom door and then immediately called the police. 911, what's your emergency? And after explaining my situation, they then instructed me to hide in the closet and stay on the line with them. He then assured me that the police would be there soon, and my goal was simply to stay out of sight until the intruder was gone or until the police arrives. After a few minutes, the crashing stopped, but I remained hidden, just like the operator told me, and after a few more, I heard the sirens. Then came a loud banging on my door as a man's voice told me to open the door, saying that it was the police. At that point, I slowly crawled out of my closet and I unlocked the door. They led me out of my home. Then, I saw the porch window shattered, but other than that, there wasn't anything you'd think wrong. After talking to the police and having them take a statement, They asked if I had any place to stay, and after calling my parents and explaining what happened, they escorted me there while they investigated the crime scene. After taking inventory of my belongings, no cash or valuables were missing. The only thing that was missing, however, was my guitar. Now, I'm not sure what happened, to be honest, if it was Mitchell or just a random home invader, but because of it, I've been too scared to ever buy anything on Craigslist ever since. And here are the top comments for my last video. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.